Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're going to get started. It's so great to have so many people joining us today. My name's Shayna Hillman. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the executive director at East End Arts. I'm a blonde woman, and I'm sitting in my dining room with a whole bunch of holiday decorations behind me. Before we dive into today's session, I wanted to start by acknowledging that our work takes place on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and Wendat peoples, and that East Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. In keeping with those treaties, East End Arts is committed to the ongoing stewardship of this land and the community we work in. And one of the ways we do this is by holding space for big conversations where we can come together to learn from and with community members and artists who live and work in the East End, and ultimately collaborate and work together to create change like today's session. And now I'd like to introduce some important people who have joined us today. I believe our MPP for Beaches East York, Rima Burns-McGowan, has joined us today. Rima is a fierce voice for women of color and has been very active in the work of East Enders Against Racism. We're so glad you're here, Rima. And I would like to remind folks that today is meant to be a fun brainstorm to get us all inspired to make change, including our elected officials, so that if you have a specific constituent issue, please save it for after the session. We didn't have any requests for ASL interpretation or closed captioning for today's session, but we are recording the event today and it will be available on YouTube with closed captioning following the event. And just so that everyone knows, when we are in our breakout groups and brainstorming, those sections will not be recorded, but the presentations back to the main group afterwards will be. So we can feel free to be really open and share in those breakout groups. So for the first half of our event, only the panelists will be unmuted. And we recommend that you set your screen to the speaker view up in the right top corner of your screen. And if you have any questions for the panel, we ask that you use the chat box, and we're hoping to get through as many as possible. So as I mentioned, after the panel, we're going to be broken into different breakout groups for the brainstorming. Those won't be recorded. Each group will have a moderator, and we're going to ask that one person in each group volunteer to take notes and be comfortable reporting back to the whole group afterwards. And if at any point today you don't feel comfortable being seen on screen, or you're just zoomed out, by all means, have your video off. This event is presented by East End Arts and is part of Artworks TO, Toronto's Year of Public Art 2021-2022. Of course, I think a lot of you know a lot of us, but there's a lot of East End Arts staff members behind the scenes today, including Adam Barrett, our talented program coordinator, wave. Tyler Andrews, our brand new office and outreach coordinator, who we're so happy to have as part of the team. Welcome, Tyler. And Alex Milne, our fantastic programming assistant. So they'll all be helping moderate the chat and the breakout rooms today. Finally, I'd like to introduce Chelsea Cameron Fickus. She's our communications manager at East End Arts. And if you've ever interacted with us on social media, it was probably Chelsea you were dealing with, or Kimberly, who's also here today, but she's not working today, so I won't make her wave on screen. If you've ever interacted with them, it's those people who make us seem smart and thoughtful in everything we do. So Chelsea, I'm going to toss it to you now.
Thank you, Shayna, for that great introduction. Hello, everybody on Zoom. Yes, as Shayna mentioned, my name is Chelsea. I'm the communications manager with East End Arts. I am a woman with long auburn hair and a ponytail, and I'm sitting in my dining room / kitchen / living room because it's all one room. I'm really excited. I said in the chat, but I'm really excited to see so many familiar faces that I've met with in person or online, but also some new faces, which is very exciting. So yeah, we're all here today because we want to tear down the patriarchy or bomb misogyny with spray paint, because we recognize that the world of street art, much like the world of business, the world of health, education, so on and so on, continues to be a space that is dominated by the work and voices of men. And like so much work in the public space, also continues to be unsafe for femme and trans femme bodies. I actually started with East End Arts in 2018. I'm originally from Northern Ontario, so I don't know that like public art is as prominent there as it is in the big city. And I remember when I joined the team, I was exposed to a program that we were running at the time, and we actually continue to still run every summer with two artists that are actually present with us today, Baraket Kesler and Monica Wickeler. And the fantastic program is called Girls Mural Camp. And as someone who is new to the world of street art and community art, I remember wondering like why that program existed or what the purpose of it was. And yeah, then I learned that, you know, the world of street art, much like many other spaces, it's a male dominated space, and that the program really was meant to empower and inspire younger generations of girls and young women to feel welcome and powerful as artists in this sector. Fast forward to this past summer in 2021, where East End Arts actually led the biggest street art project that our team has ever been a part of, Women Paint Riverside, which I feel like there's a lot of artists here that were a part of that project. And I'm sure many of you have either gone to see it in person or you've seen it online. We worked with 23 women and gender diverse artists to create 20 plus murals in the Riverside community. And it was honestly one of the most exciting projects that I've been a part of. There were like younger artists that were acting as assistants from our Girls Mural Camp program. There were artists of all different like levels of experiences and ages, all working together and skill sharing. So even in my short 3 to 4 years that I've been with East End Arts, I've personally seen the shift with women and gender diverse artists in the street art world. I've seen the work that they've been doing to continue to change the gender disparity in this world of street art. So with our event today, that's really what we're trying to recognize. We're trying to obviously recognize how far the street art world has come in the past, 15 years, 5 years, 2 years, but then also talking about how much farther it still has to go. How can we still create more space for women and gender diverse folks to participate in the street art culture? I know I have ideas. I'm hoping that lots of you have ideas and questions to bring to the table today. I just wanted to quickly acknowledge that, given the topics, conversations today might get a little heavy, might get a little messy. So we just wanted to give a friendly reminder to everyone to try and participate today with open ears, an open mind, an open heart, open everything, because really it's a space without judgment. It's a space where we have absolutely zero tolerance for hate of any kind. And yeah, if you're feeling like you need to reach out to any one of the East End Arts staff members that Sheena sort of introduced earlier, you can feel free to directly message us, or you can send us an email. Finally, one last little quick anecdote about me. So in my first year of moving to Toronto, one of the actual first artists, and I'm not lying, I'm not making this up just so it fits this event, one of the first women artists I remember learning about was named Natalie Very B. And I remember being honestly really inspired and in awe of her feminist inspired illustrations, and being so excited when I ordered my first print, I think from an artist ever, but from her specifically, was of a whimsical woman figure, which I put up in the background here, that had like period blood coming down from her legs. And I just remember feeling like so empowered and excited. There was an artist who took such a clear stance on inequality and feminism in her work. We've worked with her on multiple things. So it's really only fitting in an event where we're talking about inequality in the street art world that she is our moderator today. Natalie Very B is a Polish-Canadian illustrator, muralist, and educator. You have definitely seen her bold and bright murals around the city that depicts really beautiful themes of nature and modern female empowerment. Natalie, I'm very excited to have you here today, along with all of the amazing panelists that I know you will introduce. So I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. It's just, my heart is so full right now to see that print up on your wall, and the fact that you feel connected to the sense of feminism and how we can deconstruct patriarchy and reconstruct it in a new way. So it's a new brave world that we can co-create together. So thank you so much. And I also want to thank East End Arts for having me here, along some absolutely stunningly talented panelists that we will be learning from. It's a true privilege to lead the discussion today. and to be in this space. As a reminder, I also want to say that we are trying to ensure that this space is safe. It's not only safe for the staff and the panelists, but also for every single person that's joining here. And it's really important that we collectively work on that safety as we're speaking, as we're asking questions, and as we're participating in the breakout rooms, which will be super, super exciting for you to be in and to learn from our artists. So another thing I want to mention, just briefly tell you how it's going to work. I know Shayna already introduced it, but I'm just going to reiterate so you know what to expect from today. So at the beginning, I will introduce our panelists. We will dive into a 30-minute panel where we're going to be actually talking about misogyny and what can we do about it. So just to get an introduction from really wise minds today that are really big part of the public art in Toronto. After that, we will take a little break because everyone needs it. And then we will dive into breakout rooms. And in those breakout rooms, your panelists will lead a beautiful discussion on their selected topics. After we come back, we will just quickly decompress, settle back in, and present all the findings from the breakout rooms. And after that, well, it's going to be an open Q&A so that you can, write down your questions as things are happening, write them down, put them in the chat, and then we will address them as soon as we're back and everything's a little settled. Okay, so I think that's about it for the structure. I know I like structure and I like to know what to expect. So it is my privilege now to introduce our amazing panelists, and I will be going in a random order that I just have on my sheet. So just stay tuned as they themselves introduce themselves to you. So I will actually start with Jacquie Comrie.
Hi, everybody. Hello, hello. It is a pleasure and an honor to share space with all of you. I'm Jacquie Comrie, and I am a color-obsessed artist. I focus on public art, and it's all about using color psychology for social healing. So that's me. Honored to share space with all of you.
Thank you so much, Jacquie. I cannot wait to hear about all the colorful things that will come out from the discussion today. Monica.
Hello, hello. Fantastic to be here. I'm so excited to see how we can all collectively talk about this really heavy subject of misogyny and how we can put our brilliant brains together and come up with some potentially solutions. I'm Monica Wickeler, Monica on the Moon. I'm an established artist, creative placemaker, and I'm reading this right off my thing. And with a passion for designing public art.
That's fantastic, Monica. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Claire Browne.
Hello, Claire. Yeah, I'm pleased to be here with all of you this afternoon, not just to, I guess, wade through the muck of what misogyny means and how it affects our day-to-day, but also just to kind of revel in the fact that it is very inspiring that so much of us have come together today to try and build each other up and kind of discuss together about just positive solution making. About myself, I am a multidisciplinary artist. I'm primarily interested in kind of the botanical world, the tropical, and kind of engaging with Black diaspora.
Super. I have goosebumps hearing about all the experiences that we're bringing together today. Thank you so much, Claire. Next up, I have Fia Brucia.
Hi, everyone. I'm a storyteller who uses visual arts, including muralism, canvases, started in graffiti, Also expresses myself with writing and directing in theater, film, and television, and more recently studying and working focused on economics and innovation, and really understanding systems. And so I'm really excited to have this discussion and looking at also analysis of what kind of systems we're dealing with when we're talking about the patriarchy.
Thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, we have Danielle Hyde.
Unmute myself is a good start. Ani Bojo, hello. I just want to say I'm so grateful to be here with everyone. I'm so glad we could all come here together, even though it's a digital space, and discuss all these really wonderful, important topics. And I'm just so excited to be here with so many wonderful people. So Miigwech, thank you. So her name is Danielle Hyde, Co-Creations Arts. I'm a storyteller, collaborator, interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary artist, however you want to go about it. So my work mixes many mediums: photography, performance, visual painting, murals, whatever form is going to best communicate and do justice by stories. And so my work is all about really challenging that colonial narrative that just kind of sets itself up in this default position at the center of the conversation and sucks the air out of everybody. And really just opening the door for other voices and discussing sort of ethical relationality with the world around us and how we can come together and build community with arts and humanize wellness and take care of each other and really, take care of this all this land that we are here and sharing with so many beings. So that's what my work's all about, and super glad to be here today. All right, it all comes together. So Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I know it's just minutes away that we're actually going to start this discussion, and I am super on the inside. I'm really tingly because I'm just beyond excited to learn from you, to hear from you, and then to share this wisdom, because we have so many diverse voices here that are going to be talking about the same topic and how that affects them and us collectively. So I want to just check in right before we start the panel. Is there anything else from the East End Arts staff or the panelists that we need to discuss or check back in on? If not, no, I hear, okay, there's just head shake. So I think it's time. So my first question, and just before we do that, the way the panel will work, we will ask our panelists to just jump in whenever you feel called to speak and just to share this space in any way that feels right, to kind of vibe off of one another and just see what happens. This is a casual conversation between amazingly talented people. So let's just take it as they take it. And my first question is, how would you define misogyny in the public art world right now, today? And it's an important question I'm asking because I think we all have to get on the base level before we start diving into how we can fix it. We have to know what it really is. So I'm gonna leave it open to you.
I'm happy to start the conversation with sort of my sense of how I see misogyny playing in this industry. I feel like with any male-dominant industry, misogyny is really a tool that's used within sort of patriarch society, right? So it's a way to, I feel like in this industry, it's a way for us to behave ourselves, and not to interfere with sort of male coded roles of not to step on any toes and not to get into male coded roles. Some of those masculine coded roles would be like leadership roles or authority, and to sort of be very mindful of that. And what I think where misogyny plays in is that's used to punish women for stepping into those roles or attempting to step into those roles.
I'll just jump in and say art has always been the best historian, the best anthropologist and recorder of its civilization and time in history. And in a way, when I see misogynistic art that happens within the graffiti scene, or, you know, when, for example, when you see caricatures of pinup girls, the body shape, or I've seen, you know, competitions where two crews will battle each other. And I've seen imagery where a woman is assaulted on the wall and everybody cheers and then that crew wins. So it's normalized. So those are examples, but what I wanted to say was in this reflection that art is depicting to us, it's actually a perfect recorder of our time in history. The fact that we are still living within a misogynistic patriarchal society. And so I think to address the transformation of that kind of storytelling, when young men won't paint those kind of degrading images, it will be because we as a society have healed. And so how those two are connected as storyteller.
I can jump in. Oh no, go ahead, Sarah. Go ahead.
Sorry, we both at the same time had the same inclination. I was just going to say that I also think that there's a bit of a maybe like a stereotype that the act of using a spray can, or like the act of painting upon a wall, whether it be graffiti or a mural, what have you, it has such a history that's just told to us, whether it be, you know, oral or otherwise, that, you know, men take up these spaces or just male energy takes up those spaces. But I think it also speaks to the fact that in general, I think we associate a lot of outdoor spaces as being men's spaces, that there's a lack of safety because we've entered into the public world, and public spaces again tend to be very much under like a very, I guess it's just like you're living under patriarchy and you're just more aware of it. It's the interactions that you have to face with just being out in public. And we know that as like gender marginalized persons, that if you go into a lot of spaces, there's just inherent safety that we're always concerning ourselves with. And if the narratives that we're told is that, you know, it's mainly men taking up these spaces, whether or not that has to be true is going to come down to us changing those narratives, and kind of just not accepting the stereotype that it can only be a boys' club.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in and yeah, just kind of give like a description, or even like through my lens as a Black woman. It's a misogyny. It's all about, it's not so much hatred towards women, but it's almost like a punishment towards women for stepping into male dominant roles. When I started in public art, there wasn't anybody that looked like me, and there wasn't much representation, and it was scary being out for long periods of time. I as a Black woman, sit in the intersection of I'm a woman and I'm Black, so you have race and you have gender at the same time. So I'm constantly worried about my safety when it comes to as being a woman, you know, being sexually harassed, unwanted touching, but at the same time, as a Black woman, there's a stereotype of a Black woman, and it's this hyper sexualization, and feeling like you have to, dealing with microaggressions, for example, being touched, being my hair touch or my skin touch. So it's scary being out there for long periods of time. So that's what I see. There's a misogynoir. You can't speak about misogyny without talking about misogynoir, which is misogyny specifically towards Black women. So that's what I experience personally.
So many like really powerful statements. Just for me, like, misogyny it's both a byproduct and a tool of control for that works at sort of weight on everyone. It's not just women or femme identifying or trans. There's a cost to everyone on this, because it's just sort of like this very colonial, it serves to like maintain this colonial capitalist system of that control of behavior and that standardizing of behavior and what you can and you can't do, and these sorts of things. They have an impact on everyone. And so it really is just like, it's a part, and it's a part of this colonial legacy that we have inherited. And it goes on to function just as sort of like layering exceptionalities and rules and increasingly like absurd kind of like ideas that keep us so busy that it's hard to do the work that we know that we need to be doing, and it's hard to make the change that we need to be making, because we have to be extra careful about our safety or our energy levels or our time, because it's just constantly it just allows like it maintains that violence, and dealing with that constantly is exhausting, and it's hard to do that work. And so it helps to maintain that control and perpetuate that control of established colonial power structures, not just the art, not just through like the art, but through everything. But with the arts is a really interesting cultural vehicle. I think that's where sort of like what you were talking about with sort of art as a like being that sort of historical documenter, that sort of observing and watching, it sort of really travels with us. We grow up with art. The land is our first art teacher, and so the spaces around us are so important to understanding ourselves and our relationship to the world. Our first interactions with color is the green grass and sunsets. I mean, that's all part of the land. And so misogyny plays this part in sort of disconnecting us or preventing us from keeping connected with the land and keeping connected with each other, to make it harder to stand against those power structures. It just sort of like keeps trying to disembody people more and more. And as whenever we deal with something, it tries to just to add another layer. So it's layer on top of layer on top of layer, like peeling an onion. So yeah, I just think it's this tool, and it's this oppressive weight that has a cost on everyone.
Wow, I asked the one question and there's just so many layers, isn't there? I thank you so much, everyone, for sharing the idea of layers, the idea of oppression, the idea of how it weighs on every single one of you in slightly different ways, how it creeps in, and it has been with us through the land, through history, through gender, and through race. So now going into a more like a deeper version of this question, the way we think about systemic misogyny and about the roles of institutions and how they play a role in perpetuating misogyny for all of you.
Maybe I'll jump in just to follow up, also to tie in your question, and also to follow up with Danielle's comment. I'm fascinated by the narrative that we follow unconsciously in our society today. And if we look at the last 2,000 years and we look at the main stories, there's one main story. There are 3 magical books that have inspired us over these last 2,000 years: the Bible, the Torah, the Quran. They all follow like a main similar story that complement each other. And we look at the characters in these like awe-inspiring stories. They're mostly men. They are gendered, binary gendered. They're mostly men. There's no, gender diversity. And there might be a handful of female stories, but they're not the lead. They're not the heroes of the stories necessarily. These stories, to follow up what Danielle was saying, are the ones that are interwoven into every one of our institutions and into our systems. They have colonized the world around. These are the narratives that we follow. They are in our international laws. If we look at the law of terra nullius, which is what Danielle was referring to, the ownership of the other's land because they are not human, they are an animal or a creature. These are our international laws that continue to exist. If we look at our municipalities, we have integrated laws from these international laws and agreements that are also based on hierarchical systems throughout history. And so we are just now, which is like a grain of sand in terms of history, beginning to discuss and question these things. And so I think in order to look at the institution's role, we really have to look at acknowledging these systems, the ancient systems that we have normalized, and addressing systemic change, like realigning, readdressing, redesigning what these systems and how these institutions need to work, because we somehow think because we have, a new policy on gender diversity, it will all change, but it goes deeper than that. It goes into our lens, into our narrative, into the way we interact, into the way that we speak to each other and we see each other. And as Jacquie was saying, like, I don't see diversity. I think maybe more recently in the last 3 years, maybe 3 years, there's a tiny bit of diversity, but we have to thank, first of all, the Black Lives Matter movement that really pushed, diversity, that conversation forward. And also in 2018, the Me Too movement that allowed more voices to be heard. Prior to 2018, what I witnessed in Toronto from institutions was a high level of misogyny, unconscious misogyny, that could not be addressed because the people running the institutions did not have the tools, did not have the language, did not understand how to deal with issues of misogyny within the street art, mural, or graffiti scene. Just sign the contract, just do your mural, do your work, and please don't get me involved in this messy issue. I think the fact that we're having this conversation is one of the first times I've seen this addressed and publicly. So super grateful to East End Arts for that. I think it's fundamental. I think it can change communities if we can address it systemically. It can empower communities. It can empower all genders, all kinds of genders to express themselves. And I can go on, but I'm gonna stop here and let my colleagues speak.
Well, Fia, I love what you're saying about it we need to address the systemic problems. And I think that's where the role of the institutions come in. We need to there needs to be pressure put on the institutions to recognize, and I think East End Arts having this panel is a very nice first step. And I think that having a room full of women that potentially can put our experiences together and our sensibilities together and our brains together. We can make baby steps towards at least recognizing the systemic problems and taking a step towards finding the solutions. I'm really hoping that in my breakout room we're going to be at least talk about solutions and be solution oriented, because we all can make a huge pile of the problem, and the problem definitely exists. There's no denying it.
I wanted to speak to, as you said, kind of where the systems lie or can be identified. I do think that over the last few years, I've noticed more so that there are more diverse stories represented in street art, as opposed to kind of these very sterile, publicly funded murals that just were a means for a very specific type of narrative to be immortalized, whether it be like a settler storyline of like, here's a bunch of white men, they built a town, so incredible, nothing was here beforehand. And I do think that for a very long time, that is the sort of narrative that kept being painted again and again. And again, like, it's a conscious decision by these persons to just maintain a status quo and just maintain a system of just white oppression that also tended to have absolutely no space for anyone who was not an able-bodied white man who's able to actively participate in capitalism. So I think that with public funding, with our, larger positions of power, systems of power needed the pressure to realize that there are other voices, that we're not interested in the continuation of this narrative. It's not, it never was appropriate, and it never was true for the space. And I think that at least my hope with like our discussion today will be to just further determine, like, are there alternative ways for like other sorts of stories to be out there, or how do we re-engage these places that also already have these markers of misogyny and patriarchy already there? Like, how do we proceed from there and from this legacy?
I think honestly the role of institutions is, again, to just amplify women's voices, and especially POC and Black and Indigenous women, creating spaces that centers POC creatives, or creating funding and being invited to, let's say, if there's a mural fest of some sort, it's only men, white men mostly, and this is internationally, not just here in Toronto, but abroad. And anytime that there's some type of mural fest or a mural event of some sort, or a mural jam, it's like 90% men, and then you have like one woman, or and it's mostly not POC people that get invited to these events. Having maybe 50-50, or just inviting women to be a part of it, and it's not just like, oh, let's just include, just making it more accessible for everybody to join and to be a part of it. Just creating budgets that center POC people, and just amplifying, trying to find a way. Also, I usually get invited to these type of panels, and I'm the only Black person there. It happens. Like I'm actually surprised, and I see a lot of diversity in this panel, and in, you know, people that are here today, but usually it's just me. And anytime that I try to talk about my experience as a POC artist, I get shut down. People get very uncomfortable by talking about, you know, race and being at that intersection of race and gender. And it's you know, reaching out to people of color and making these opportunities and these spaces more accessible for everyone, not just, you know, just making it more diverse. That's what I shouldn't be the only Black person there. That's just how I.
Danielle, did you want to add anything?
Yes, and sorry about any audio issues. I know that there might be something, some kind of weird beeping coming from my computer, so I'm going to stay on mute as much as possible. Yes, in terms of what is the role of sort of those institutions, I really think it's important that, if, at least in terms of subverting or changing the narrative, it's to listen. I think it's to listen and create space. I think it's really, really challenging when institutions who have been perpetuating or are deeply tied up in or benefit from a lot of the harmful structures that we're sort of started to reference today. If their well-being is tied up in those, for them to then sort of try and undertake certain actions without the voices or input or direct leadership of those who have been dispossessed and those who have been marginalized. It just comes to an issue of, if your well-being isn't really fundamentally tied up into the wellness of the movement itself, it can become an extractive relationship. And so I really just think the role is to open space, create space, to recognize and listen where, you know, certain things just need to be broken. Like sometimes you can't, like, you know, like we've all kind of grown up in the system and we've internalized so much of it that we're a part of it. And so this idea that we can just sort of beat it by being a part of it doesn't really work. It's just sometimes there are just certain things that need to be dismantled and broken, and being open to that, because I think that when we start talking about access and inclusion, for lack of a better word right now, there is a level of discomfort with that, because it does require that we unsettle ourselves, and it does require that we do things differently and by ways that are not as predictable or standard. And it's important that the right voices and hands and bodies are you know, guiding that process of that shifting.
I can add also, I think there's also a misconception that women are not misogynist. And when we're talking about institutions and these systems, what I encountered in Toronto with regards to misogyny was institutions that were run by majority women. Important institutions in Toronto, main institutions, there are not that many, run by women who made choices that were part of the patriarchy, that continued the oppression, that extended that kind of misogynistic lens. And when one takes a step back, it's almost as though these women, in order to achieve that level in the hierarchy, had to adapt to the patriarchy and embody the patriarchy. And so how do we look at this role of the institution or system and say, okay, how am I supposed to expect this institution to change if they don't even have the first ingredients? Like, what is the ingredients required? So what are we going to throw into this recipe? what are the tools? What is the education required? What is the training required to even understand the language, to even begin to listen? Like, what does active listening mean? What does understanding the patriarchy mean? How are we complicit with that? And so once those institutions and the people and women and men and all genders have that understanding, I think then will we be able to take that step forward to create that kind of understanding, or fill those institutions with people that have the backgrounds, that have dedicated themselves to either lived experience or training, but that have that voice and that lens and that sensitivity. Because I do still think that that is a huge barrier that we're facing. And I say particularly in Toronto, because street art muralism is run by a handful of institutions in Toronto. It's monopolized. There are main institutions that run the agreements, that run the IP, intellectual property agreements, that run how the funding works, that run who is chosen. Whereas in other cities, there might be internationally I'm speaking, in other countries, there may be more, graffiti, a graffiti scene where you go and you paint and you express yourself. Toronto's very controlled. It's very much on the market system based, commercialized. We will tell you, oh, that's kind of too controversial, don't paint that. Okay, now you're approved. And so within the context of Toronto, I think it's very important to understand what tools we want for these institutions, what tools are required so that we can build this dialogue and communication and move forward.
I just want to quickly add to that because you brought up a really interesting point. I do think it's important to note that there is just a very active subculture of graffiti. It's just not as necessarily maybe as acknowledged. So even though it's not being as publicized or as celebrated, if you would, as the artwork that the controlling institutions in Toronto are doing, it's very active. But even within, the interesting thing about that is that even within that subculture, regardless of what your view is of illegal art, or where your position on that is, I think it's also important that we, give a nod to the fact that even those uncontrolled spaces have their own problems to it, because they typically involve being out at certain hours and in certain ways that individuals who are identified as female or identify themselves as female or just may not feel safe to be out there at those 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning when you need to be out when it's quiet and it's dark to bomb a wall or to do something, right? Those are really unsafe places for a lot of individuals. And so even there is sort of that issue of misogyny is at play in different ways, because a 5'8", 6 foot male artist with other male artists to support him could go out at 3 a.m. and do something, whereas an individual female artist who's 5'4" and doesn't have that same sense of community may not be able to access those space. So, well, on the one hand, they're only concerned about, keeping away from security or police or keeping it out of the eye of the public until the work's done and it's there for everyone to see in the morning. We also have to sort of navigate the night itself. We have to navigate the shadows and the corridors, and all those great hiding spots that maybe would be great to navigate are somehow more dangerous and potentially life-threatening to another artist. And so there is that illegal art scene, but even there, even in that uncontrolled or that ad hoc guerrilla style or grassroots, however you want to phrase it, there are still inherent problems there.
And I think I'd love both of those things, Fia and Danielle. And I think that both of those points bring forward again the idea of like masculine coded and feminine coded things. So street art is inherently has been masculine coded for, it's a male dominant industry, right? So part of the entire system is that this is like men's work. So how do we get past that? How do we get past breaking down these masculine coded roles that are being filled by us as successfully, you know? And how do we stop being punished for that?
Thank you so much, everyone. Wow, this discussion is getting richer by the minutes. I am so blessed to hear this. And I think before we go on our break and then go to breakout rooms, I have one more question that I think is really important for us to tackle, because it offers, or I really hope that it can offer everyone here an insight into your personal experience with barriers. So the question I have for you is like, what barriers are you personally experiencing, you and your community, on the realm or in the realm of public art, working as a muralist?
I think I can just speak to not only in the industry of public art, but working in the film industry, working in the advertising industry, studying industrial design, all of these things that I've done for the past, 25 years have been male dominated industries. So there's a barrier. The very first step that I take is a barrier. So I think you get really sneaky about learning how to climb that barrier. I recognize, I've been saying to some people that I've been doing this quietly, and that I think that's not the solution. I think that we need to be loud about it. I think that we need to get past these barriers through collaborations. We need to be loud in these collaborations. I think we need to not only collaborate with other skilled and talented people, but make sure that it's inclusive and spotlight that,
Thank you. I saw Jacquie unmute herself. So let's go to Jacquie.
Yeah, I would say personally, my barrier is, I would say it's again, safety, feeling safe. That's one thing that I deal at every production that I have. I deal with either very sexist or racist comments, okay, about, again, my appearance, this like fetishization of me, of my body, of my skin, just for simply being there. I'm in front of the wall, I'm doing my thing, and somebody comes up like in my personal space to like, hey, what are you doing? Oh, and the sexual harassment starts, or the, oh my goodness, I've had people touching my hair, or asking me, what are you? What's, oh, that's that, who cares? I'm there. And I find it, but I gotta say this, the saddest part of it all is talking about it and be not listened to. And when you don't listen and you kind of, I have people that have, it's like the gaslighting of, and having some, this racial, just gaslighting of not being believed when you are talking about like, oh my God, like this person just touched me, or they made a comment about my hair or my skin or where I'm from, or assuming that I'm not from here. Just the simple act of asking like, what are you, and wanting to know, it's like, please go away, don't touch me, okay? Unwanted touching, why? And but not being believed when you talk about it with people, with people in your life, that right there is the saddest part. And that is perpetuating when you don't believe Black women, when you don't believe women of color, when they're talking about their experience, and just kind of gaslighting the situation, and, you know, kind of like, oh, you know, maybe it's not that important. It's not that important. You know, like, you guys, he says something about your skin. Maybe he's like, you know, he's trying to be, or she or he are trying to be complimentary, and, you know, and that feeling of not be believed is really hard. It's really hard and painful, and it's having to kind of prepare myself when I'm out there, prepare myself, and kind of feel like, oh, you know what, I'm going to be sexually harassed today, and that's just part of the job. That right there is a problem. So that's my experience for me. Believe Black women.
I know for myself, like, having only more recently begun creating murals and kind of working in more of a public art setting, that I had a lot of like perceived barriers around, for example, like who is celebrated in the city as mural artists. And especially for a long time, it just seemed like a lot of the voices or the artwork that was being shared and spoken about were very male dominated, and very just, it was just very masculine, and it just seemed to be framed that way. Having entered into it, I do think that it doesn't have to be the case. And I love to see so many faces even today, like in discussion and just in this room today, who were a part of like my own research project of like, what could this look like? Who are the other voices who maybe are not being continually showcased at higher levels by, again, systems and institutions, but who have something very important to share and to say. I think that, like, to Jackie's point, like, there's also just the worry when you're entering into making public artwork. You're out in public with people who are not respectful necessarily to anyone who does not look like themselves, or just the very shameless approach of like, well, what are you doing here? As if my being present in the space, like, I'm very clearly creating artwork, I'm very clearly have all of the markers that I am doing a job. And then if you're not satisfied with the very simple notion that like, hi, we're here making artwork, and then it becomes about a person's personhood and about, you know, the just irritating questions at hand that are just microaggressions and are just something that weighs on the conscious and on your psyche and on just what should be a beautiful act of like creating artwork in the world. So I think that since a lot of stories around public artwork, a lot of senior artists, it seemed like when I was trying to find out how to enter into this, a lot of those voices were male. And I wish that I had more ability in those early days to really discuss with other people like who looked like myself of like, what does it mean to be a woman doing this on the street? What does it mean to be a person of color, a Black person trying to paint out in the world? And the fact that like, if there aren't teams of people, if there aren't even, for example, like, you know, with East End Arts or any of these lovely institutions, groups, people who are there saying, hi, we're here to support you. Part of that support really is about, I think, creating at least a bit of a sense of like safety or something like that, because time and time again, I do think that if you are not again, if you're just a Black person out in the world, quite often the assumption is that somehow I'm not supposed to be there, or that I might be doing something that is, detrimental to the neighborhood at hand. And I just think that is, again, a narrative that is still alive and thriving, and disgusting, and needs to somehow be removed. So I just think that we need to just maybe figure out how to empower ourselves, or like continue to create just safety nets for ourselves.
Yeah, just safety right off the bat. And I also think it's important to note that nothing that is being discussed has to be the case. None of this has to be the case. All of this stuff is all constructed, and it's all completely absurd. And we could, abolish all of it tomorrow if the will was there to do it. But yeah, just huge issues with safety, and the level of sort of danger to work at different hours, and hours that work for me as just someone who can't always be there like during the daytime hours, and might have to be there a little bit later at night or start a little bit later. Just having people, just the level of entitlement is really, really bizarre. And just people entering space, getting into your space, and having really long conversations, and trying to offer me money to invest in things, to buy dates with me and things like that. Well, I'm trying to work, and I'm telling them that I have a deadline, and it's like 9 o'clock at night, and I'm trying to get something done, and it's like it's the early part of November, and it's getting cold. And it's like, I don't have days and times to spend, but just the level of entitlement. And they corner you. Like, you're there to work. You can't move the wall. You can't take the wall home with you, into the safety, into some kind of sense of safety where you can work on it there. So here you are, you have to be in this certain place in time. And it's okay for them to take up that time, to take up that space, to force on you sort of this interaction. That is an incredible amount of entitlement. And then in addition to the gaslighting and not believing or taking it as seriously as it should be taken, that was expressed earlier, also making excuses for the behavior. I once said to somebody, about someone who had come around, and he was just lurking for hours, and just the weight of somebody standing behind you, silently staring at you for hours, repeatedly, like a certain number of times during like more than one day. Like, he kept coming back, and it was all to try and get a date out of me. And this guy was like, it doesn't matter who they were or how old they were, but it's just like that weight trying to work ruined some of like the most favorite moments of like painting, because like you layer and you put all this effort in, and you get to a point where you get to do some of the fun stuff, those details, the little things that you love to do as part of your style. And just having someone's just right there, they might as well have been in your face. And just being like, and expressing that to someone, and the response was, well, it's because you're stunning. Excuse me? Like, as if that makes it okay, if that makes it acceptable. So just the excuses. And I think, part of that stems from misogyny as a whole. These unwritten rules where you're not supposed to be there. And so it's your fault. Your skirt's too short. You shouldn't have been out so late. It all kind of falls within the same narrative. You're not supposed to be there. And it's forcing that blame and that responsibility onto the wrong party, when the issues are far deeper. It's both that individual who is exercising that entitlement and taking up that space and endangering the people around them, but it's also those deeper systemic issues that need to be addressed in order to really uproot and deal with some of these things.
I think everything that everyone has said has resonated with me. But the question also, and I think hearing everybody speak, made me think of what are the barriers? And then it made me think, what has facilitated, what has been the counter barrier? And for me, that has been having community and my crew. And I think my story or my background was I started painting on the street. I started through graffiti. I started with crews on the street. I didn't learn in an institution. I didn't go to university for visual arts. I didn't study it formally. I learned from my peers on the street, from teachers on the street. And I have to say that my experience with misogyny was much stronger in Canada than it was in other countries. I think when I traveled and painted in South America, it was so open, so inviting. We got to paint with all kinds of different crews. Crews were like, "Tu pinta, vamos," like, you paint, let's go paint, let's go, grab your cans, blah, blah, blah. Oh, do your technique like this. It was the first time I didn't feel like I was being seen as a woman, or like, you can't run, you can't climb. No, we're gonna get slowed down if you come with us. And that was so empowering. I think a second element in my journey has also been the fact that I'm very close to my sister, Shellac Attack, who's amazing. She's like my hero muralist, artist. And our journey was really together from the beginning. And so in that way, I don't know how it would have been had we been alone, had we not had each other. But in that journey together, in that collectiveness, we got to, I think, overcome a lot of these barriers. And those, I think the biggest barrier for me coming up was not that beginning, was not that like painting on the street at night, was not, not having that collective, but was when I hit the institutions in Toronto, when it went from the street into the street art, into the formal muralism contracts. I think we formulate this market system of art stars that everyone wants to attain through contracts and grants that are individual. It's promoted or validated for you to become an individual star. It's not promoted to be like, this is your collective, this is your crew. That's something that's kind of left to that underground scene or that otherness. And when I see that division, and when I heard everyone speak today, I'm thinking, wow, we're really speaking as though when we face these barriers, we are alone. We shouldn't have to feel that way. Where is our collective? Where is our crew? How do we build that so that we don't feel alone? Because those barriers of misogyny are rough, they're hard, they're violent, they're, grotesque, they are exhausting, and all the multi-layers of that. And so I think there is a question here, also an underlying question of how grants are distributed, how our funding mechanisms work, what our market system promotes as an individual star artist, as opposed to promoting that collectiveness, and how we can also question our own individual role in terms of supporting each other. Like I have 15 years of painting, and if Claire is coming up, what is my role in being like, I'm here for you. How can I be here for you? What do you need? Like how do we create that? And this panel, I feel like, opened an opportunity for that. We see each other sometimes on social media, but we don't converse like this all the time.
Oh, wow. The richness, the openings. I mean, every single one of you. Big thank you for bringing these issues onto our plates so we can see them, so we can investigate them, so they're no longer invisible, so they're no longer just inside sitting, you dealing with this at night, you dealing with comments, dealing with the systemic. It feels to me, by you, all of you saying it out loud, it all of a sudden becomes, it seems like it's just now entering the realm where we're actually going to do something about this. One of the first conversations where we're like, you know what, we've always known that this can't be happening, but it is. And now all of you bringing your experiences to the table, it's changing it. And I think it's so important that you're talking about it. So thank you all so much for this panel. Stunning. It is our break time now. So everyone can take a breath. Our panelists can just take a little breath for a second before we go into our breakout rooms with your participants. So we're gonna see you back at 3:20, maybe 3:20, yeah, let's say 3:20, and we're gonna be back soon. All right, welcome back, everyone. So before we do the big jump and allow you to go into your breakout rooms to work on troubleshooting and dreaming up solutions, I would like to ask every single one of our panelists who will be leading each one of the breakout rooms, just give a one-sentence description of what they hope to talk about in each one of their sessions. So I will start with Jacquie. Just one sentence is fine.
My breakout room is about, it's just opening a space for healing, for awareness about misogyny. That's what it's about. And just a lot of people are not aware of what misogyny is and how it affects women. And awareness is key. So I just wanted to open a space for people to talk about it. That's my space.
Thank you so much. That's very exciting. Fia, what is yours about?
So it's basically focused on how do we engage more gender diversity to participate in mural creation, consultation, and also how this can then impact community.
Awesome. Thank you. Claire.
Unmute myself first. So I'm kind of thinking about, like, as people are thinking about entering into mural making, public artwork, how do we kind of build that early community to feel empowered to enter into these spaces?
Super. Monica.
Hey, yes, I would like to do a breakout room where we potentially come up with some solutions and maybe how each of us can recognize a point where we ourselves are participating in the social structures of patriarchy and misogyny.
Wow. And thank you so much, Monica. And Danielle, are you there? There you are.
That helps. For my breakout room, there's a question that I don't think we get to ask ourselves very often, and it's, what would it mean to win? You know, what does it mean to have principles grounded in love? What would it mean to tell the stories that we really want to tell? So yeah, just having the opportunity to sit with everyone and to ask that question and to see, you know, if we come up with some good strategies on what resistance looks like and uproot a few problems or things that don't serve us anymore, that's all great too.
Amazing. Wow. I think I'm going to actually have a chance to jump into every single one of the rooms and hear the awesome stories, but I will now pass it on to Adam, who will take care of doing the magic, which I'm not capable of assigning people.
We've all been randomly assigned to breakout rooms. I'm going to push the button and we're all going to just hope. We're just going to hope, friends. Technology is hard and we can all do hard things. Ready? Let's see what happens. All participants have been invited to join breakout rooms. I think you all have to click a button. Click the button.
Okay. Welcome back. So nice to see your faces. I was floating around. There's so many awesome discussions going on. But I just want to maybe take a minute. Let's take a minute to all decompress for a second from the learnings, from the ideas, from the discussions. Taking a moment to ground your feet on the ground, if that's possible. Feeling that connection to our land, feeling the gratitude that we have. And connecting with your breath, if that's comfortable for you. Whether that means stretching your arms, maybe relaxing your neck muscles, and taking a breath of freshness to welcome the new in, so we can, from a place of groundedness, come back into this discussion. So now, I would like to invite every single room, our leaders of the rooms, to just present some findings, some conclusions, or maybe more questions that you've come to. And maybe let's start with Danielle. Unless I see you're still typing. Would you like me to get to you later?
A little.
Okay, no problem. So
I haven't been the first person the entire time. I'm kind of like, da, 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 da. No.
Okay. I was just switching it up there, but no problem. So how about this? How about I just ask, who's ready to present now? Claire?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Awesome. Thank you.
So we kind of framed our discussion around the idea of building community and kind of talking about different perceived barriers or hurdles to making murals, making public artwork. So we kind of had just first phrased around like what were these barriers that we were experiencing. For example, we discussed like imposter syndrome, the fact that it can just feel like everyone else knows what they're doing, or you're seeing the end product, but we're not understanding how it is that they got to that level. With larger institutions, there can kind of feel like there's a bit of a like closed door or some sort of club that you need to know somebody to basically gain entry. There was also a question here about like translating your work into your work or your practice into public artwork. So how does taking your personal artwork and putting it out in the world change it, politicize it, perhaps change the meaning? And then as well with street art, the fact that there is a great deal of anonymity that could be taken advantage of, especially when you're discussing street art, and then how that changes once you get into signed public artwork or publicly funded mural work, that really changes things. Lots of concerns in our discussion around ideas of legality, about where you can make artwork, what are the rules and regulations when it comes to making artwork outside of sanctioned spaces, and how intervention artwork, again, functions when we have concerns around safety and gaining access to space to learn without fear. So when we were discussing this, we really did identify this this need to find a crew to perhaps be the change that we want to see to some extent, to lend that hand to someone who's interested in creating murals, who's interested in that art scene, to just continue to like nurture those connections, so that people do feel safe and called upon to be able to make that work. And then also so that with these sorts of struggles, you're not alone in trying to understand and deal with them. I did also feel called, even just personally, but just the idea of like showing up for each other as much as possible. So I think throughout the discussion today with our earlier panel, I think that it's really important that we identify that there are systemic problems, there are just cultural problems that we're currently dealing with anytime that we choose to make art in a street environment, and that we need to be present and available to each other and actually hold productive space for others, just to be able to share and just build each other up. We had also thought that there should be more transparency about how to get involved in the street scene and how the creation of murals actually functions. The passing along knowledge and sharing space and resources should not be something that is hard to access or something that you have to pay to access. So I think there should just be more just free exchange of information and knowledge, and more pooling of resources, such as, you know, holding these jam sessions, holding just space where we can pose our questions to the community, and then just make more informed decisions through sharing our knowledge and our resources.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Claire? Wow.
Yeah, I know I'm speaking a lot. I think really like the discussion as we progressed was just truly like very positive, because as much as we had spoken about, you know, barriers that we may have experienced, we did have a lot to say about the like really empowering and like loving communities that we have managed to find through like meeting and working with other artists through murals. So I think it's like, I hope that the discussion at the end of the day will be that it is hopeful, like we're not doomed, and we, you know, at the end of all of this, I hope that we will continue to reach out to each other and kind of use this discussion today as an opportunity to make new acquaintances, friends, and just art colleagues.
Well, first of all, something that Jacquie told me in our last meeting is to never apologize for speaking up. And I took it with me, and I want to tell this to you as well, that you're saying your work have so much value and so much meaning, and the fact that you're here is so amazing. And I think hearing from someone who's you know, in the beginning stages of her mural career, I think it's so important that you're the voice that can really change the community and create a new sense of community. Thank you so much, Claire.
Thank you.
Natalie, I think this is interesting because this might be a really good place for us to jump in because, right, Kirsten, because we were riffing off some of those same ideas. Kirsten, and I know I hate to voluntold you here, but I think we should go next because we're riffing on some of those ideas about knowledge sharing and empowering through jams. So can we talk about that? Kirsten's on mute.
There we go. You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Monica and I had a great discussion about things that you sort of need as a muralist in order to establish a career. And, you know, each of these points led to a broader discussion. But broadly, you know, the first thing you need, especially at the beginning, is you need walls. You need to build a portfolio. And that's really difficult. And things like Women Paint Riverside are really, really key because it's absolutely harder for women and people of color to get walls than than white men. That's just a reality. And the next thing that you need is fair wages. You need to be paid fairly for your work so that you can keep doing it and so that it's sustainable. And, you know, one of the things that I brought up is that in my past experience, when I haven't known what to quote for a job and I've reached out to male friends in this world to kind of ask for input, they typically give me a number that's a lot higher than I would have come to on my own or necessarily felt comfortable with. And, you know, it's just a suspicion, but I have long suspected that men, particularly white men in this industry, get paid more for the same work than other people do. And so, you know, one thing that I've fantasized about for a long time was having some sort of group, like maybe a secret Facebook group, although Facebook's looking less and less good all the time, so maybe it's on some other platform, but a place where people could come together and share what their wages were. Because if you don't know what the industry standard is and you're charging less, that can work out well for you. The reality is in the short term, you might get some extra work, but it's not a long-term sustainable thing. And it's, you know, fair wages really are a rising tide floats all boats situations where it makes the work better for everyone.
And we also talked about, not to interrupt, but we also talked about how that actually undermines other people in the industry in terms of, you know, putting together unpaid work and putting that forward so that you could get the job. It totally undermines, you know, other people that might be in the same position to go for that. Just wanted to make sure we talked about that a little bit.
No, it's a great point. I gave Monica, I asked Monica to please interrupt me.
Yeah, so I have permission to do this. Woo!
Yeah. So, but you know, like, yeah, so we talked a lot about industry standards and the fact that it's really important to have knowledge sharing around what's expected, not just in terms of a fair wage, but also in terms of safety, also in terms of, you know, administrative work, like how many revisions you're going to do, what you're going to charge for those. And that it does feel a little bit like the Wild West out there. You know, I know even like I've been at this for a while, but still when I like submit a quote, like I wonder what other people's quotes look like and, you know, if I'm really doing it right. And at one point I had heard that there was an effort a few years ago by an organization to get a fee standard established for Toronto mural artists, and that there was unfortunately a lot of resistance to that from more established artists who felt that perhaps their wages would actually go down if there was a fee schedule that a client could publicly see. And, you know, yeah, that's a fair concern, but I think a bigger concern is that people are coming in and they're not charging enough for it to be sustainable for everyone. And they're not getting what like the client would probably happily give them if they only knew to ask for it. And, you know, another thing that we talked about is that, you know, inherent in privilege is a sense of entitlement and knowing what is fair to ask for and fair to expect. And that if you don't have someone who has that sense of entitlement sharing with you the way that they operate and move through the world, that, you know, you just sometimes don't even know what is reasonable to expect and request. And so that kind of knowledge sharing is really, really important. You know, the other thing we talked about was that, you know, I think the third thing that you need aside from walls and fair wages is at a certain point you need attention. So you need, you know, good press coverage or to be, you know, get good clients or be invited to good festivals. And a lot of those things are invitation only, which is where the boys club really, really flourishes, because there's just, you can't even apply to most big mural festivals. Like they really are invitation only. And it's really hard to figure out how to break into that system. So, you know, Monica raised a really great question, which was, you know, do we even want to be part of the Mural Festival Boys Club, which I think is a very radical and interesting way of looking at the situation. I personally do want to be part of that world. And, you know, it can be really
Or can
hard.
we create, or can we, Kirsten, create something that, you know, even blows that out of the water? So take the boys club scenario and make it into a girls club scenario, or take gender out of it and just make it into an inclusive, to step away from the patriarch and redefine it, you know.
Yeah, so just on like a final point, and then I'll wrap up, is that one of the ideas we had that could be interesting would be to bring in, possibly via Zoom, some mural artists who are a lot more established than anyone even in Toronto, who are really operating on that international stage, and have them do a skill share or a Q&A and share some of the knowledge that they've gained about how to operate in the world. Because I do actually think that Toronto seems like it has a pretty good apparatus in place for giving information to emerging mural artists, but there's not much once people are at the mid-career level in terms of getting mentorship from people above them. And yeah, it would just be really, really nice to talk to people who have really made it internationally and hear how they did it and what they suggest and how they operate and navigate through networking in that world.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, so that's, I think I got it all.
How exciting it is to dream of these possibilities of what we can create and co-create together. So the Boys Club is not just something we're like, oh, well, we can never get there. No, we can make that new sense of inclusivity that is not ruled by patriarchy. I just love that. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have 3 panelists left. Who's ready next? Jacquie.
Hi, hello. Honestly, I wanted to have a nice, just an organic space of awareness, of healing, of sharing. I often, actually, this is I could say one of my barriers personally, that there isn't enough spaces, mental health spaces for people of color to talk about just the stuff that we deal with, the type of issues that arise from being at the intersection of race and gender. Anytime there's intersectionality, we are caught in this, we deal with racism and we deal with misogyny all at once simultaneously. There isn't just, we don't have, I will speak for myself personally, I don't have the privilege of not talking about race or not talking about my experiences with racism. It's all like at once. And whenever I'm in panels or whenever I'm in spaces where, again, it's very lonely because I'm the only one there to add to that conversation. Whenever I bring up, my issues of intersectionality, I'm met with a lot of, again, gaslighting and a lot of people sort of, kind of minimizing my experience as a woman of color and as a creative working in a public environment, in a public place. I deal, as I said before, I deal with unwanted touching, people wanting to know if this is my real skin, or is it what, I've never seen this type of hair before, or touching my afro, or wanting to know, again, what are you, and things like that. So it is, there's sort of, when we talk about misogynoir, which a lot of people don't talk about, and again, in conversations of feminism and misogyny, the experiences of people of color are usually minimized and kind of pushed to the side. And we have to, in conversations of race and conversations of, just culture, we need to talk and address how hard it is for people of color. It's been historically, and back in 2008, misogynoir was a term that was coined by Moya Bailey, and it just to kind of pinpoint the type of violence and the type of experience that of misogyny towards Black women specifically, and again, it's something that I deal with on a regular basis, anytime that I am out there, I'm scared. Okay. It's just, it's just a part of my job, and having to navigate that type of discomfort, and having to find a way to focus on my work while still having trying to keep my eyes around me so that I am safe, and I'm, nobody's going to come in and try to, violate my space or try to hurt me in some way because of my race or because I'm a woman. So what can be done? I feel like we all perpetuate and we all add to this bigger, broader sense of this stereotype of Black women, how they are indestructible. They are, that stereotype of the strong Black woman or the sassy Black woman, or the over hypersexualized Black woman, how, and all of that perpetuates and adds to that narrative. And how people are, there's sort of a repulsion, and at the same time, there is a sort of I want to be like a Black woman. I want to have your butt, and I want to have your lips, and I want to have tan skin. So it's this hyper sexualization all plays into this reinforcing of misogyny towards women of color. I honestly, what is the solution to this is, first of all, when you see a woman of color speaking about her experience in the world and how navigating this experience, try your hardest to just open space for that person and just to create space for that person. Because as a non-Black person or a non-person of color, when you intervene and you gaslight that person and you kind of minimize or become defensive, or you feel like you are being attacked in some way, that's when you are perpetuating and adding to that problem. So listen to people of color, believe them, and try and see how you can amplify their voices. What are you doing right now to amplify creatives, Black or POC creatives? What are you doing? How are you using your privilege? If you don't have to think about race, good for you. I'm jealous. And now as a mother, and a mother to a Black child, I'm terrified. I'm fucking terrified. I'm sorry for that's how I'm terrified, honestly. And having to think about, how do I talk to my kid, my baby, about race when the time comes? How do I keep him safe? And how do I keep myself safe? It is, again, listen, when a person of color or a person of color, a woman of color is speaking about her pain, listen, just listen and hold that space for that person. Don't try to intervene. Because I think, again, that's a way to perpetuate this broader misogyny towards you're adding to the problem by not listening. And that's it. I spoke my mind, and I'm thank you for holding space, and that's all.
I think, Jacquie, thank you so much for your bravery to speak up, to using this space to be true to yourself, to share your experience that many people might not know about at all. It's so important that we hold these spaces. Thank you. Thank you so much. So before we wrap up, we also have two more people. We have Fia and we have Danielle. And I'm checking. Danielle, are you still typing?
I'm good to go if we're good. So I'm going to try and do my best to do justice by like the amazing fluid conversation that came out of our discussion. And if anyone who was in the room feels that I missed anything or misinterpreted anything or wants to step in, go right ahead. So feel free to interrupt me. But we started off with just sort of this discussion in terms of what would it mean to win and why it is that we don't think about this very often, and just about constantly being busy and time being taken up. And it's not something, it's an important question, but it's not one we get to visit often. And I think to summarize it, safety was just this prevailing idea that came forward, and just never having to go out at night and feel unsafe, never even having to think about it. What would that even be like? Not ever having to expend of ourselves, of our bodies, of our time, ever. Just, it's gone. What would that feel like? And just to sit with that, the ability to just be, or being, and just how profound, fully experiencing that would be like if we could just close our eyes and just when we open them, it's all gone. And what that would feel like. Would you be lighter? Would things be easier? Would it be safe, warm, to be free from sort of that entitlement being acted on us or against us? And what could we do? What would we do if we had that? And just sort of like in sitting with that, this idea of it sort of it being fantastical. And why does it seem like it's a fantasy? Why is it so far away? And just why is it such a challenge to see? And why, just to really make it tangible, or to what does it look like? And why is that so challenging? And just the exhaustion, noise and clutter also came up as sort of barriers to that. And just also how interconnected these systemic partnerships are when we start talking about misogyny, capitalism, colonialism. Religion also came up both into, on both a national but global level in terms of how these partnerships sort of like interconnect or interwoven. And just how difficult it is to kind of like see accurately through all of that. And so it's really challenging to tackle these things when we can't really see the steps in front of us, because, it's so unclear. So if we can't see them, then teasing out, what if we could feel them instead? Because we have sort of an instinctual understanding of some things that need to change. We know something's wrong. We're all here talking about it. If we didn't know on some instinctual level, I don't think any of us would be here today. So we know something. So how do we feel that out to begin that process? And why is that important? So just benefits that came forward, just, gender expression, care, safety, how that would sort of proliferate, and how we could all just sort of enjoy that. And so this intuition that we're kind of talking about, this feeling, like how can we trust in that? Because we may feel we can trust ourselves implicitly, but what do we need to do to trust others safely and sustainably? Because, to trust others who themselves are harmed by these same systems, they may be, tend to violence. They may, they're harmed by these same systems, so they tend to project and act out that violence on others. So that is a reality that we're dealing with as part of this story that we're trying to change. And so we can't know the imagination of others. And this power is something we all have, and we all embody it differently. So how can we sort of liberate this imagination? The stories we understand the world with from these colonial misogynistic structures, and how important healing is, the role of healing and communal and collective healing, being in nature, reconnection to the spaces we're inhabiting, and also connecting to natural spaces, as sort of being a challenge to that noise and that clutter that's constantly preoccupying ourselves and our time and our energy, and making it so difficult to undertake that healing that then helps us to be able to connect with others in a meaningful, sustainable way, and also heal ourselves so we're all interacting in a good way. And meditation. So this idea that I really like that came out of is just sort of expanding ourselves from the inside. So expanding our inner spaces, and how that changes the spaces outside of us, and keeping that grounded in something, keeping that grounded in love, and care, and quiet, and listening. So again, keeping that healing and that collective healing in the way that can create space for that trust to be engaged with safely, when we're doing it together. And if we had that space, what kind of art would we or could we create entering those spaces? And I think that gets to part of this whole process is, different stories. How do we do stories justice? How do we tell stories differently? And having more stories, and the beauty of having those more stories is that also creates more healing, and they kind of flow naturally together. And so just as an exercise to imagine those spaces, even though it feels so far away, to start to see, feeling this out, and supporting those stories that come with that healing. And that, I think that's sort of kind of where we came around to. And it's just sort of like trying to sit with and imagine those steps for something that, may seem so challenging, and self-care, and teaching, like encouraging knowledge sharing, for so many things, like how different it would be if we, from an early age, we taught, how to care for our bodies, how to care for each other, and how that would dismantle fear that probably plays a lot into empowering or sustaining a lot of these really harmful narratives and colonial single narratives that are this legacy that we're still dealing with. Because at the end of the day, we're dealing with very real, what's being negotiated with is very real things. It's housing, it's food, it's safety. These are things that are being sort of played with, and to use people to make people feel like they kind of have to go along with capitalism. And so just as I abbreviated further investigation, abolish capitalism. But really more specifically, what we were talking about was the way that commercializing of care and paywalls is a barrier to this care. When we're talking about, what would it mean if we just provide free education to kids and we teach them how to take care of their bodies, and how that would benefit them and remove that fear. But then, as we know with capitalism, they like to be able to capitalize on, being able to pay for a therapist, things like that. So dealing with those paywalls, dealing with money as a barrier. So you have, again, there's that real thing being played with, your health, you know, in exchange for you doing certain things, subscribing to this capitalist system and that cycle. And so I guess that's kind of where we left it, is for further, you know, thought and investigation is, you know, how do we further interject ourselves and disrupt that cycle of that, and maybe engage more in providing more free care and support, to have that capacity and create that foundation for the healing and storytelling that we know needs to take place, so that we can see those steps in front of us. What does it mean, you know, to not have to deal with misogyny anymore? And I think that summarizes it, but please feel free to step in if I missed anything.
Oh, Danielle, thank you so much for such a, the concept of healing, living in peace and safety, and educating from a young age. I think that really ties in to what Jackie was saying, to what Claire was saying about like creating spaces where there is no fear. Thank you so much. And again, last but not least, we have Fia. We would love to hear what your breakup room was up to.
So we had a great team discussion, and we have Sean and Chelsea who are going to speak on behalf of our group.
All right. I guess I'll start. As a trans, non-binary, Indigenous, disabled person, I kind of was hoping for this one. So I think to start is really acknowledging the reality of trying to dismantle misogyny means dismantling racism, ableism, white privilege, all of these things that really uphold that. So we can't really dismantle misogyny until we really talk about the realities of that. And I think it's really important to talk about the intersectionality of identities. And I think it's been mentioned before, but it's so important, and how certain folks have privilege. So acknowledging that reality is really important, especially when we talk about violence and safety. So when we talk about violence and safety, it's very real for trans, non-binary, gender diverse people. It's so real. It happened this summer to me, being physically assaulted on a mural site. And so when we talk about these things, it's not just talking about it. These are real experiences for Indigenous, BIPOC people. And we really have to take that in. This is reality, right? And so if we think about these things, we really have to really think about them. They're just not words, right? So in terms of safety on mural sites, you know, what are organizations doing to ensure that folks like myself are safe? What does that look like? What is the responsibility of the organization? How are you going to keep me safe? I really want to know, like, that's important. How are you going to keep trans, non-binary, gender diverse people safe? And I think that has to start with the organizations getting training. At 519, gender diverse training is accessible. Language is so important. Even pronouns, just like sitting here and acknowledging that any spaces that we can start with pronouns, or putting our pronouns in our Zoom sessions. Those things help people feel safe. And it normalizes it, right? So if we talk about misogyny, these are some practical tools I think that we can all do. We came up with some other cool ideas in terms of like visibility, seeing ourselves more. So having a mural jam where gender diverse people, trans, non-binary, two-spirit, LGBTQ people, totally BIPOC would just like, that would be a really good opportunity for emerging artists and to build network and community. We also talked about contracts. I don't know if I'm leaving out anything, Chelsea, feel free to jump in, but contracts are really tricky. And especially when you live with like so many intersectionality, like identities, they're not consensual, right? And I think that organizations really have to start working together. So we came up with the idea that any of organizations that are leading any frontline, like mural jams, arts, things like that, that you really work together to push back against the city and acknowledge that some of these contracts are very problematic. Especially, like, I can only speak for myself, being Indigenous, the wording, like in terms of like control and ownership, like those are problematic terms that have lived on like forever, right? So these things are really, they're small, but they're huge. Like, we wouldn't have to do that work and pushing back. Like, that's an additional work that we have to do, right? So some of these practical things we just kind of brainstormed. I think that's probably pretty much, feel free to jump in, Chelsea.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like you basically covered it. I feel like when we were talking about solutions to this and like, you know, how do we engage more gender diversity in mural creation and consultation, like it really did, it came back kind of at the end where we recognize the responsibility that organizations have. And so we talked about like, you know, that it would be really, I think, important. And if organizations, you know, because in our conversation we had Mural Arts and East End Arts present, if they were to band together with other organizations across the sector to really talk about the changes that can be made to reflect, you know, the broader sector. Because yeah, the contract piece was definitely a big thing where we're like, you know, as an organization where we have to then report to larger funding bodies, you know, above us, it's like, how do we then make those changes throughout? But of course, banding together is a big one. And yeah, we were just talking to about like how, yes, like with contracts, but also with grants, like they really are like people who are the gatekeepers are the ones who can access those grants, are the ones who understand how to write those grants. So yeah, I think maybe from a perspective of somebody who does work for organization, I think I appreciated that. I feel like the institutions and the organizations maybe need to be doing a bit more to come together to talk about like the changes that we actually all really want to see so that we can then hopefully implement them.
Yeah, and we also something I found out, just like for artists, knowing that you have rights, like you have rights, and just realizing that and acknowledging that and having those conversations and sharing with each other, that's also really important. That can help with like negotiations and however contracts would work.
Thank you so much. And again, I'm lost for words at this point because there's just so much that I've learned, and I can guarantee that everyone who's participating has learned so much. And I'm wondering, Fia, is there anything you want to add to what your breakout room presented?
I mean, they covered everything. Maybe just also highlighting the point within contracts that has now been like a new model within this, specifically within the city of Toronto, in which to receive funding, the artist must sign away their intellectual property rights, and understanding that artist rights in Canada legally, you automatically own your mural, you automatically own your public art. And so to understand where this new contract of signing away your IP rights is the only way to get your mural contract, and the only way you can fight back is if your name is big enough and established enough to fight back. If you're like a starting artist, you don't have a chance to fight back. You're just not going to get that contract. But understanding where this intellectual property contracting model intersects with misogyny is to understand that you as an artist already are facing challenges economically. You as a marginalized person within that artist community, you know, being a diverse gender, being BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, Asian, etc., you are already further marginalized. When you have to sign away your intellectual property rights, you are now fulfilling that misogynistic contract by saying, I will further give away my economic income and provide the institution with that income of my intellectual property rights, and I will further marginalize myself. And so does the institution, does the centralized monopoly that exists within Toronto understand its role, that it is further perpetrating this misogyny, further perpetrating its patriarchal model by exponentially growing that marginalization for a BIPOC, gender diverse community within the arts sector, and especially for young artists that are starting out. So you have to sign, I mean, I think there is a tremendous role for, and you know, Chelsea and Sean both spoke to this, what is the institution's role? What is that middle organizational role within that? Because the pressure is so big when you only have a centralized monopoly of granting money and, you know, allowance to paint murals.
Thank you so much, Fia, for adding. I think we unfortunately have run out of time to do a full Q&A, but what I want to encourage everyone here to do is to add our amazing panelists on Instagram. There is an East End Art post that has all of them highlighted. And I really encourage you to make more conversations and continue this so that we can really keep learning from one another and keep co-creating a world in the future that is not a misogynistic world. So again, it's been such an amazing pleasure to hear your voices, to hear your stories, and to learn from you on every single step of the way. And I really hope that you've benefited from this discussion and the discussions that we've had. And again, thank you for having me. I will pass it on to Shayna to close this gathering.
I'm going to be so brief because I know we've kept you all longer than we said that we would keep you. And I'm upset that we didn't get to have the Q&A, but I do want to continue this conversation. It came up in our breakout group, the idea of having these little networks on Instagram or WhatsApp or whatever where we can connect. But also these have been some really big, heavy topics. And I want to encourage everyone to kind of practice some self-care tonight and, you know, sit with that and just be gentle with yourselves. Thank you so much to Natalie and our amazing, wonderful panelists. You guys are just amazing. To everyone, all the participants who came, the East End Arts team, Adam and Alex, who in the background have been doing all of the tech things that I have absolutely no idea how it works. I mentioned in the chat, but Marta from Mural Roots and I have been DMing through this entire conversation. It's so important. And this is just the beginning of the conversation. And it's going to keep going. So follow all the panelists, follow East End Arts is all of our channels. We're in the middle of doing a big year-end wrap-up campaign right now, really highlighting some of the work that we've done over the last year. We're so proud of it, and we're so proud of the team and all of the artists that we work with. Yeah, so thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful night. And we will put this recording up. They'll have closed captioning on it, and then as well, a lot of the resources and links from the chat. We'll share those out with everyone as well. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.